Hello everyone, I'm Brior and welcome back to Goodgame Empire. Today's video is my first in over 2 years, and this time we're doing something a little different. Rather than making new tutorial videos or offering opinionated commentary on the present state of the game, I thought it would be worthwhile to embark on a series of videos covering the history of Goodgame Empire year by year. That way, old viewers, who might not currently be playing the game, will be able to reminisce. At the same time, newer viewers might be curious to learn something about the game from a time before they played. I myself have played, or at the very least paid attention to, Goodgame Empire since 2012. While I might not be qualified to make high-level tutorials anymore on account of my recent inactivity, I would not so humbly suggest that there's nobody better to talk about the history of the game. Another reason for me to make these videos is that Goodgame Studios has announced that they will soon be deleting the game's forums, which will cause a lot of information about Empire to be lost. I'd like to document and celebrate a game that I obviously greatly enjoyed. If that sounds like something that interests you, I hope you'll stick around not only for today's video, but for the whole series of videos, which will be released here on the channel every other Friday over the course of the next few months. So, without further ado, let's get started. The beta version of Goodgame Empire was released on August 14th, 2011. The information I have about this earliest version of the game is limited, as I was not playing at the time, the player base was small, and there was no official forum. There are many old screenshots of the game online, and I will show you hundreds throughout this series of videos, but they usually are not associated with a specific date. Goodgame Studios was, however, in the habit of issuing press releases. This one, entitled Strategic Battles with Goodgame Empire, from before the beta was released, is the earliest mention I can find of the game. It makes clear that, from the beginning, Empire was designed to be a blend of economy management and military strategy. Accordingly, some key features of Empire have been present from the beginning, including main castles, quests, alliances, and player versus player combat. Goodgame Empire was not Goodgame Studios' first game. Rather, it was preceded by 8 others: Farmer, Cafe, Mafia, Fashion, Poker, Magic City, Disco, and Hercules. Of these, Poker and Mafia, now renamed Gangster, remain playable. At this time, Goodgame Studios was growing quickly. It had over 100 employees by the time Empire's beta was released, and it was seeking to hire 150 more. At the end of 2011, its founders, Christian and Kai Warzenek, were jointly named Startup Entrepreneur of the Year 2011 by the accounting firm Ernst & Young. During the first year of Empire, more than 12 million players created accounts. Many players first discovered Empire on flash game portal websites such as Miniclip, or through social media sites like Facebook. The first updates to Empire added outposts, citizen animations, additional languages, and characters like the Marauder. They probably also added new quests, new levels of buildings and fortifications, and increased the level cap. The game's forums weren't launched until 2012, meaning that not many details about these earliest updates have been publicly preserved. I began playing the game myself in August 2012, almost a year after the beta's initial release. After that point, I'll try to fill in some additional details from memory. Before we begin, however, I think it may be helpful to point out what critical features of Empire were missing at this stage. For example, the game did not have equipment. In place of the general system, there is a feature called Sword Brothers, where players befriended others in the game. The number of Sword Brothers you had, and how active those Sword Brothers were, determined how many spies and commanders were at your disposal. It wasn't the best system, but it contributed to the social aspect of the game by fostering contacts between alliances. Evidently, Goodgame Studios concluded that daily activity and equipment should be handled separately, as those now are 2 different systems in the game. In 2012, Empire was also missing most of its events. As far as I'm able to piece together, some small events, such as the Traveling Knights and the Shadow Mercenaries, were in place by the end of 2011. And, as we'll discuss momentarily, new events and features were being added almost weekly. But there was no nomad invasion, nor any foreign lord invasion at this stage. In the absence of PvE, or player versus environment, tasks in the game, PvP, or player versus player, flourished. The game's economy was quite a bit simpler in these earlier years. Stone, wood, food, coins, and rubies was pretty much the exhaustive list of currencies. While rubies, of course, provided an advantage from the beginning, they had limited uses, with only a small number of premium buildings, like the bakery or the stables, in the game. I remember the festival square as being a prominent premium decoration early in the game's history. A castle full of these likely meant the account owner bought rubies. The game did have a premium subscription service, but it was different from the modern-day subscription offerings and not terribly popular. It was replaced by the VIP system in 2014. For those who didn't play Empire back during this time, it's likely the full scope of missing features will only become clear over the course of this series, as we discuss all of the game's later updates. Know this, however, in 2012, Empire was a much simpler and shorter experience. Outside of PvP, there wasn't much to do at the endgame. Frequent updates were part of Goodgame Studios' design to keep players engaged. When researching for this video, I found a gaming blog that reviewed Goodgame Empire in November 2011. One line in particular caught my attention. Rating Empire a, quote, decent 7 out of 10, the blog author explained that it was a great game for people with limited time. I would disagree with that sentiment now, but I don't doubt it was true back in the day. The author explained that much of what players did in the game, like upgrading buildings or collecting taxes, could happen in the background while players were offline. So, then, let's talk about what was added to the game in 2012. The first update to have been memorialized in an English-language forum post raised the level cap to 42 and added a new adventure map and the hideout. Though basic, adventure maps were once useful for lower-level players because they rewarded small decorations with unique artwork. To unlock adventure maps, players had to collect map pieces from robber baron towers. As no new adventure maps have been added in recent years, all of the rewards are quite outdated. The hideout, a building that protected a small amount of resources from being looted by a successful enemy attack, has proved situationally useful. Because hideouts do not contribute to food production, however, players generally do not keep them up permanently in their castles. Later in that same month of March, Goodgame Studios announced another update, this time raising the level cap to 43. This update appears mostly to have introduced technical improvements, such as allowing players to find alliances more easily and to collaborate with alliance members by forwarding spy and battle reports. In April, Goodgame Studios added a major new feature, New Kingdoms, where high-level players could build new castles. The 3 new kingdoms were, of course, the Everwinter Glacier, the Burning Sands, and the Fire Peaks. This was a smart update in my view, making good use of content, such as building artwork, that was already in the game. The new kingdoms' special resources, charcoal, oil, and glass, wouldn't be added until later. However, the new kingdoms weren't just cosmetically different from the Great Empire. In place of outposts, they featured resource villages that players could compete to capture. Each food resource village captured in the Burning Sands, for example, would increase food production in that kingdom by 30%. This bonus was significant, as food production was naturally harder to come by in the new kingdoms. I remember watching carefully in the Fire Peaks for new resource villages to spawn near my castle. To be able to capture resource villages in each new kingdom, the player must have constructed a loot warehouse. By allowing players to capture resource villages from one another, Goodgame Studios introduced a new front for PvP combat. At least on the United States server, stealing a resource village was ordinarily cause for war. There was one other respect in which the new kingdoms served, in my opinion, as an example of wise game design. It may have been accidental. As new players joined each kingdom, the map would expand outward. New resource villages would sometimes be added. The update did give players some control regarding what direction their castle would spawn in, and this enabled players to coordinate with other members of their alliance. Today, however, one is more likely to spawn in the middle of the map, in a hole left behind by another player's castle that has fallen to ruins. Back then, The level requirement made it more likely that new players would spawn near similarly powerful opponents, and one's neighbors in the Everwinter Glacier, for example, were likely to be different players than in the Great Empire, meaning a new set of PvP targets. The Great Empire works similarly, of course, but the New Kingdoms' level requirement made it more likely that players who joined would stick around. The result, at least on the United States server, was that the New Kingdoms were more densely populated with active players than the Great Empire was. To this day, while my castle in the Great Empire is now quite lonely, I still have neighbors in the Everwinter Glacier, the Burning Sands, and the Fire Peaks. By April 2012, Empire had already proven successful, and Goodgame Studios set a new hiring target to increase the company's staff to 800. The next major content update was in June. It added Sabotage and the Great Tournament. I don't have much to say about Sabotage other than that it was a small and basic improvement to the PvP system. It came with some likely unintended uses. For example, players discovered that sabotaged buildings would not be destroyed during an outpost capture. That led to lots of friendly sabotage. The Great Tournament, which I've found a screenshot of here, was a relatively straightforward event. The challenge was to collect glory by attacking other players. There was also a version for alliances called the Alliance Tournament. Due to a flaw in game design, however, the Great Tournament was fairly short-lived. Rather than collecting glory through real, hostile PvP, players quickly figured out that they could maximize their glory by coordinating attacks with and against friendly players. After all, if you knew your target was not going to earnestly defend his castle, you could send glory banners in place of regular tools. In some of the most egregious cases, the attacking and defending accounts were probably run by the same person. Goodgame Studios eventually discontinued the Great Tournament, which I think is a shame. While the event may not have worked as intended, there was still some skill involved in coordinating a strong attack with a poor defense to maximize glory. It was also pretty fun. Only 2 weeks after the first June update, there was another one. This time, Goodgame Studios added 2 new small events, the Robber Baron King and the Shady Character. These new features oriented players toward PvP and attacking robber barons, something that has always been important for collecting coins and other rewards. At first, the Shady Character was a one-time thing. Successful completion of the task would not result in a new target. The update also added a new item for sale at the Resource Trader, the Mysterious Crate. In retrospect, the Mysterious Crate is interesting for being a predecessor of other random number-generating elements in the game. Consider the Wheel of Unimaginable Affluence, Mystery Boxes, and General's Offerings. Monetization in these early days was tamer than it is now, though, so I don't think many players thought much of it at the time. The next update was at the beginning of July. It added a 4th level of fortifications, plus another wave of attack for high-level players. But this was only the first of 3 July updates. The second expanded the Traveling Knights and Shadow Mercenaries. It also responded to community feedback, allowing an Alliance General to claim Alliance leadership if the Alliance leader fell into ruins. The 3rd July update added the Thorn King event, which was something entirely new. To unlock the event, players would need to spend a small amount of resources. They would then be given a small camp on a new temporary map. Players would need to construct tents and storehouses to be able to send large armies to the event world. In place of public order, players could install banners to increase morale, which in turn would increase attack combat strength. Players would then complete a short story by attacking and defeating enemy towers from left to right on the map, thus helping the Thorn King reclaim his kingdom. Completing the event rewarded the player with talismans, a new currency that could be spent in a new event shop on, among other things, very strong troops. By all accounts, the update was well received. The fundamental mechanics of the Thorn King event would later be reskinned as 2 other events in the game, the Blade Coast and the Underworld. In August, Goodgame Empire achieved 2 significant milestones. First, it had been 1 year since the beta had been successfully released. Second, I had just created my first account. The next major update came in early September. Goodgame Studios added a new crown jewel for the most powerful alliances on each server to capture: capitals. Capturing a capital and building a palace allowed players in the Alliance to recruit Kingsguard troops, at the time the strongest coin units in the game. But, more than that, a capital stood as a symbol of an Alliance's strength and coordination. Building a palace cost millions of resources, and the capitals were always subject to attack, even if the players holding them activated protection mode. At the time, there were only capitals in the Great Empire. Looking back, capitals didn't actually do that much. What features they did have quickly became outdated. Nevertheless, conquering an enemy alliance's capital is still often an important and exciting war objective. The September update also added a new premium building to increase recruitment speed, the training grounds. At this point in the game, soldiers had to be recruited 5 or fewer units at a time. This essentially meant that players had to be online to recruit large armies, and the training grounds helped. Additionally, a new level of the Watchtower was added. In October, Goodgame Studios introduced major new additions to the Research Tower. Players could now increase the capacity of their market barrows and reduce the travel time for troops being sent to the new kingdoms. Research provided yet another way of, piece by piece, building one's empire. There was also a new small event called the Architect. Certain buildings, like the dwelling, could only be upgraded to the highest levels while the Architect was active. While a neat idea, the Architect was mostly an annoyance in practice. Remember, this was before time skips, and it was also before Goodgame Studios provided any kind of heads up as to when an event would be running. The Architect's tent was easy to miss, and sometimes the player would already be constructing something with a long build time when the Architect appeared. As a result, certain upgrades were hard to get. A second update in October consisted of some technical improvements and minor adjustments to the Resource Trader and Robber Barons. In November, another big update landed, this time adding the Battle for Berimond. In that event, 2 noble houses competed for control of the Kingdom of Berimond. Upon joining the event, players chose to fight either for the red team or the blue team. Similarly to the Thorn King event, players had to build tents and storehouses to support armies in the event world. Players were then required to defeat enemy watchtowers to unlock the path to the enemy faction's capital. Conquering the enemy's capital, it was said, would end the event for all. What was neat about the Battle for Berimond was that the watchtowers displayed the total number of times they needed to be defeated by all players, and you could watch this count down in real time as your faction made progress. The balance between the factions was also reflected by this meter at the top of the screen. Also in November, Goodgame Studios added the Plague Doctor and the Fire Station. There's a gap in the English language forums around this time, so what you're seeing here has been translated from the German. The Plague Doctor was a premium version of sabotage. Even if the agents were caught, the target would never learn who hired them. I don't think many players bothered with this feature. The Fire Station, somewhat intuitively, reduced the fire damage in your castle in the event you were defeated by an enemy attack. Together with Fire Castell and equipment, which of course was yet to be added at this stage in the game, and research, the Fire Station could make one's castle impervious to fire damage. By lessening the consequences of a failed defense, Goodgame Studios paved the way for attack strength to be increased in the future. The best way to think of the Fire Station, I think, is therefore as an iteration on the game's PvP balance, which was in constant flux at this time, thanks to the rapid pace of updates. Toward the end of November, Goodgame Studios added 4 new glory titles to allow all players to recruit the Kingsguard troops that were already available to players in alliances that owned capitals. In December, the final update of 2012 added the Colossus event. Here, players donated resources from their castle storehouses to construct a powerful decorative item. There were several different appearances of the Colossus, awarded depending on the player's performance in the event. 2012 was an incredibly successful year for both Goodgame Empire and Goodgame Studios. Empire also attracted recognition from across the free-to-play browser game industry. It won Best Browser Game and Best Casual Game at the 2011 German Developer Awards. It also won a European Games Award and Best Online and Social Game at the 2012 BAM Awards. Meanwhile, Goodgame Big Farm, another Goodgame Studios title, celebrated over 1 million registered players in its first 6 weeks. At the end of 2012, Goodgame Studios reported over 100 million players across its games. It was also an exciting time to play. While there may have been comparatively less to do in the game, there were frequent updates and a rapidly expanding player base. That version of the game is gone, though the modern version no doubt appears, and in some ways is, similar. Perhaps Goodgame Studios would one day consider bringing back a classic version of Goodgame Empire. Let me know in the comments whether you'd consider playing it if they did. That's all for today's video. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Tune in again 2 weeks from now for the next episode in this series covering 2013. Bye-bye.